Hey, this is Jorge with Hypothyroidism Success Story. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit about weight and hypothyroidism. And so something kind of interesting happened. I talk a little bit about all the different root causes of hypothyroidism, different ways that you can become hypothyroid. And so for the most part, it was my understanding that when you have hypothyroidism, you tend to gain a lot of weight. At least that was my case, and that seems to be the case in the majority of cases. And then I also know that if you lose weight, then usually you are hyperthyroid. And like my aunt, she had a hyperthyroidism. In most cases, what happens when you're hyper, it's my understanding that it's harder to control. It's a lot more dangerous. I remember my aunt, her eyes were kind of like bulging, sticking out. She almost lost her vision. I think she almost had to go through surgery, or I don't remember, but she had a lot of different problems. And what they did for her, and it seems like what they do with a lot of people who have hyperthyroidism, is that they, I think they irradiate or cut out the thyroid, and basically essentially what they do is they turn them into hypothyroid instead of hyper, just because it's supposed to be easier to control them. But anyways, so I posted a video yesterday, and one of the comments was very interesting, and so I'll just actually read it off to you. It said, could you talk a little bit about people who are underweight, in at least one video? And so my first question was, are you hyperthyroid? Because that was my understanding, that only people who have hyperthyroidism tend to lose a lot of weight. And she said no, that the doctor had said hypothyroid. And so I thought it was a unique case until another person commented, and she said, me too, I am underweight but diagnosed hypo. And so my first thought that came to mind was, do you have any sort of gut issues? And so the reason why I thought about that question, the reason why my mind went there directly right off the bat, and this is what I want to share with you, is my thinking process, is because I had heard a while ago, and I can't remember where I first heard this, but basically what I heard was that being underweight and gaining a lot of weight, usually the root cause, essentially you can direct it right back to gut health. And so I want to read off to you a little bit about a book that I read that helped me a lot with a lot of my digestive issues, a lot of these problems, I guess, that we're seeing. And so this book is called Patient Heal Thyself by Jordan Rubin. And so you can actually see the picture of Jordan here. He used to be super skinny. He had Crohn's disease, and then that's him now after he was able to get better and basically understood what I personally started to understand, that again I believe is basically what has helped me the most. And so chapter 3, Beyond Probiotics, there's a little part here that I wanted to read off, and it says, Jordan says, for us, the center of health is the gut, the body's gastrointestinal tract. That's why our whole food concentrates are always targeted in one respect or another to aiding gastrointestinal health. One of our mottos surely is that you are not what you eat, but what you assimilate. The gut is more than the second brain. It is also the seat of the body's defenses, the center of immune function. In addition, let's see, I want to actually skip that part, but okay, so I wanted to skip that part, but I wanted to talk about, how he feels about how the gut is like the center of everything, which is, the same way that I felt, especially with everything that I know. But I'm going to skip forward to page 47. Let's see, I want to say... So it says, the problem is that after antibiotics have wiped out all or much of the entire gastrointestinal landscape, the bad bacteria have the upper hand because they love the type of foods that we typically consume in our diet, especially the carbohydrates found in bread, pasta, milk, candy, baked goods, and soft drinks. So when the balance of good and bad bacteria is disturbed by antibiotics, it's the bad bacteria that get the head start in repopulating the barren property within your gastrointestinal tract. And especially consider this, the kind of food people who are sick or have been sick love to eat is what we call comfort food. You know, milkshakes, breads, pastas, cookies, fries, the very kind of food that promotes the growth of disease-causing bacteria. Dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the gut flora, results in abnormal fermentation in the small intestine. In the large intestine, some fermentation is desirable because it produces butyrate, I don't know how to pronounce that word, and other short-chain fatty acids that nourish the cells of the intestinal wall. In the small intestine, however, growth of yeast, fungi, and or fermenting pathogenic bacteria can result in damage to the gut lining, absorption of toxic byproducts, and impaired absorption of nutrients. So that's the last part, I guess, that I wanted to point out specifically. I'll read that one last part again. Impaired absorption of nutrients. So, the basic principle, I guess, here is, and it's basically what I was referring to when I said yesterday that there was a concept that for me was hard to understand, but or it was kind of weird at first, if you will, because like I used to think like if I ate any kind of food, I'm feeding myself, but it's not really that you're feeding yourself. You're actually feeding the bacteria that lives in your gut. And so if you understand, there's two things that can happen. One is you can have bacteria that basically produces toxic byproducts, as it says here, absorption of toxic byproducts. And then you also have, bacteria that essentially they eat all the nutrients. And so the bad bacteria, like they eat all the nutrients and you get nothing. And I think that's what's happening here is that, even though you're eating food, you have some sort of bacteria, whether it's yeast, mold, fungus, some sort of parasite that's eating, the nutrients from your food, and you're not getting any. And that's basically why and this is my opinion, by the way, this is why I believe you might be underweight. In the case of, the rest of us who struggle with weight gain, what I found was happening was that we have bad bacteria that produces so much toxins, and all those toxins essentially they go into the body and they start plugging the lymph system, which starts to get clogged, and then you start to accumulate those toxins in the body. What it does is that encapsulates those toxins in fat in order to protect itself, and that's why the more toxins we accumulate, the fatter and basically the bigger that we get. And basically the way for us was to basically reverse that process, and it all basically boiled down to gut health. And that's why even though I talk about some of my in some of my programs I talk about different things like to build hormones, how you have to understand the importance of eating fats, adding more fats to your diet, especially foods that have fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. I talk, there's like a lot of different things. And so when people ask me about diet, for example, there's like the ketogenic diet that I like to follow. There's the autoimmune paleo diet, AIP paleo diet. But, like I mentioned it, there's the reason why the things that I do today work for me is also because of what I did way back in the beginning, which was, juice fasting. Still, like I said, the most effective thing that I know to get rid of fatigue and for fat loss as well. And then the second thing that I know that I did that helped me out a lot was to have some sort of gut healing diet. And so, if you want to think of the process, I guess, the timeline, how I went about it was I did juice fasting, which cleaned out my body, kind of cleaned out the slate, reduced the population of all sorts of bad bacteria in my gastrointestinal tract, basically the digestive My whole digestive system was essentially, cleaned out, and basically leveled the playing field so that it's not just the bad bacteria that have the upper hand at repopulating, but rather I want the good bacteria to have the upper hand at repopulating. So I juice fasted to clean out the slate. The next step was to focus on a gut healing diet, which was basically fermented foods and or traditionally prepared foods. And after that, then I transitioned into more of a ketogenic, paleo type of diet. And I did a little bit of like raw vegan actually in between juice fasting and a gut healing diet. So it's kind of like a raw vegan and then gut healing diet and kind of a combination of both, because most of these fermented foods essentially qualify as, being raw vegan. So there was like a little bit of an overlap in there. And so that's why, that's one of the reasons why, focusing on a gut healing diet is what I recommend. So if you haven't already done so, I would recommend to check out, Traditional Cooking School, which is going to help you, understand what a gut healing diet is and how to prepare these foods. So right below this video, I'm going to actually post, a link in the description. You can check it out, and I highly recommend you come check this out. It's a traditional cooking school, and even if you check this page out and just scroll down, you can read, there's success stories from others who also have hypothyroidism, like Maureen. She had Hashimoto's, and you can read here. She says, even though she wasn't trying to lose weight during this exciting time, she lost 100 pounds without even trying. And again, her focus was a gut healing diet. Her symptoms started to improve. She's still improving to this day. She doesn't feel sick all the time. Brain fog is practically gone. Energy is back, and monthly female cycles are much better. These classes were the turning point for me. Again, the reason why I know that diet works is because that's what I see it's happening in a lot of cases. If your gut health isn't on par, if it's, if you have any kind of imbalance, any yeast overgrowth, any kind of bad bacteria, yeast, mold, fungus, and or parasites, if you have that in there, that's what's causing either the toxic byproducts that are making you fat, or that's what's stealing your nutrients that are essentially, keeping you underweight. And so I'm kind of starting to even for myself understand more of like the timeline of what I did. So I'm glad that question was brought up. And so also recommend reading this book if that's your case. I'll have a link in the description as well for this book, so you can check that out. I'm gonna keep this video short today, and this coming up week I'm actually gonna be fairly busy. We have some friends visiting from Alaska, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to make many videos next week, but I will be sure to keep you updated as soon as I'm able to post another video. So hope this information was helpful, and I will see you guys next video.